Welcome back to the deep dive. I have a kind of weird question for you to start things off today. When you woke up this morning, how did you know you were you?
Oh man, that is a really heavy way to start a Tuesday.
No, seriously though, think about it. You woke up, you looked around the room, you saw the dresser, the window, maybe you reached for your phone, and you just said to yourself, okay, the world is still here. I am still here. Physics is working. You didn't even think about it. You agreed to it.
Right. Yeah, it's the baseline assumption of sanity, basically.
Exactly. But what if I told you that that entire process, that split second where you just accept that the wall is solid and that time is moving forward, is actually a negotiated contract? And what if I told you that there are other places, other dimensions entirely where you simply didn't sign that contract?
Now we are getting into it. That is the core of it.
I really hope you are somewhere comfortable for this one. If you can, maybe dim the lights a little bit, grab a blanket, because the conversation we are about to have, it's the kind that is best served late at night when the world is quiet and you are ready to have your perception of reality bent just a few degrees to the left.
Yeah, it is definitely a sit back and let it wash over you kind of session today.
Bro.
But we aren't just telling ghost stories here. We are really looking at the underlying mechanics of consciousness.
Mechanics is the perfect word for it. We are looking under the hood of the universe. But before we tumble down this particular rabbit hole, I have to make our mandatory declaration. This podcast will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes. We are here to learn, to share, and to have our minds blown, strictly for the sake of education.
And we have quite the manual to study today, don't we?
We really do. We are cracking open the early sessions book 7 of the Seth Material, specifically focusing on session 284.
Which was recorded on September 7, 1966.
Right. And I want to set the scene for you listening because context is everything with these sessions. Picture Elmira, New York, 1966. It is a Wednesday night, just past 9:00 p.m. Jane Roberts, the medium, and her husband, Robert Butts, who we will call Rob, are there in their living room, and they are just beat.
They are completely exhausted.
Physically wiped out. It has been a long week. Rob has been painting and dealing with all the mundane stresses of life, trying to sell his art. Jane is tired. And yet Jane sits down, maybe takes a sip of beer or wine, closes her eyes, and proceeds to enter a deep trance state. And through her comes Seth.
And what is so fascinating is the contrast there. You have two very tired humans in a dimly lit living room, and suddenly through them comes this voice, Seth, who is absolute high energy and ready to deliver what amounts to a doctoral thesis on how the universe actually works.
It is like being really sleepy in a physics class, except the professor is a multidimensional entity speaking through your wife.
That is one way to put it, for sure.
But the mission for this deep dive is pretty specific. We aren't just talking about vague philosophy. We are talking about the root assumptions of reality. Seth asserts that our physical universe, everything you can touch, taste, and see, is just a tiny, incredibly limited slice of a much larger inner reality.
And to navigate that larger reality, you have to learn a completely new set of rules. If you try to use the rules of physical Earth in the inner reality, you are going to get lost. Or worse, you are going to scare yourself to death.
We are going to decode those rules today. We are going to look at the software code that runs your waking life versus the code that runs the dream world. And I want to give a huge shout out to the publisher New Awareness Network. If you find your brain itching after this conversation, and trust me, it will be, you need to go to the source.
Absolutely. We can only cover so much ground in an hour. You really should check out the books at sethcenter.com for this early sessions. The New Awareness Network keeps this material alive, and it is worth every penny to have these physical books on your shelf. It is dense, it is complicated, and it is absolutely brilliant.
So, are you ready to dismantle the ego?
I think so. Let's do it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Seth starts this session with a bit of a reality check. He basically looks at us, at humanity, and says, you guys think you know how the world works, but you have no idea.
It is the classic tip of the iceberg argument, but on a cosmic scale. Seth opens by saying that the physical universe is far more complicated than we know. He says, quote, you move individually in a very limited area.
Which feels a little bit insulting, honestly. I like to think I get around pretty well.
Well, physically, maybe.
Yeah.
But he is talking about dimensional movement. We think this physical space is it. We think the universe is just empty space filled with stars and planets, and that is the whole game. But Seth says in reality is massive.
Massive in a way we can't even measure with a ruler.
Right. He says its reality exists in dimensions that the physical system literally does not have. So it is not just more space somewhere else. It is a completely different kind of existence. And here's the kicker. He says we gloss over what we don't understand.
Which is such a deeply human thing to do. If I see something I can't explain, I usually just pretend it didn't happen and go back to scrolling on my phone.
Exactly. We edit our reality to make it comfortable. And the editor-in-chief, that is the ego.
The ego, that loud voice in our heads that takes credit for absolutely everything. I decided to wake up today. I had a great idea. I am the master of my destiny.
Seth is pretty brutal with the ego in this session. He basically says the ego is a squatter taking credit for the landlord's work.
Wait, really? Because I feel like I am my ego. If you take away my ego, who is even talking to you right now?
And that is the fear speaking right there. Seth calls the ego the topmost portion of the self. He says, and I want to get this quote right because it is profound, were it not for the dreaming self, the ego would not exist.
Ouch. So the ego is like the CEO who thinks he runs the entire company, but actually the workers in the basement, the dreaming self, are the ones keeping the lights on and the machinery running.
That is a perfect analogy. The ego focuses on the outside world. It handles survival, social status, stopping at traffic lights. But the energy, the vitality, the actual consciousness comes from the inner selves. Seth even adds, were it not for past existences, the personality as you know it would not exist.
So why is the ego so terrified of looking inward then? If the inner self is the source of its power, why does the ego completely freak out when we have a weird dream or an out-of-body experience?
Because the ego loves definitions.
Yeah.
It loves control. It loves saying, I am here, the chair is there, and we're completely separate. It loves clear boundaries.
Yeah.
And in reality, those boundaries dissolve.
And to the ego, dissolution feels exactly like dying.
Precisely. If I cannot tell where I end and the wall begins, the ego panics. It thinks it is being destroyed. So when we get freaked out by a weird dream or a ghostly feeling, it is just our ego panicking because it lost the instruction manual.
It is clutching its pearls because the laws of physics just walked out the door. Speaking of physics walking out the door, Seth drops a concept here that always melts my brain a little bit, the spacious present.
Yes. This is crucial for understanding the rest of this session. If you don't get the spacious present, the rest of this is just going to sound like weird science fiction.
Okay, walk us through it. Usually we think of time as a line, a timeline.
Right. Life A happens in 1800, then you die. Then life B happens in 1900, then life C in 2000.
Yeah.
Like beads on a string.
Simple? What? Linear? Very logical?
Seth says throw away the string. He says lives within the spacious present are simultaneous.
Hold on. So right now, as I am sitting here talking to you in 2026, I am also a blacksmith in the 1400s. And I am also a spaceship pilot in the year 3000, all at the exact same moment.
Theoretically, yes. Think of it like a house.
A house. Okay, I'm with you.
You are currently in the living room. That is this life. You see the couch, the TV, the rug. That is your reality right now. But the kitchen exists. The bedroom exists. The attic exists. Just because you aren't in them doesn't mean they aren't happening. They're all now in the structure of the house. You are just heavily focused on the living room.
And I can't see the kitchen.
Because of the walls. And in this analogy, the walls are time. But if you could walk through the wall...
I'd be in the kitchen. Or the 1400s.
Exactly.
That is, it's comforting and terrifying at the same time. It means past lives aren't past, they are just next door.
It changes the stakes entirely, doesn't it? It means you aren't a single person moving linearly through time. You are a massive entity occupying many rooms at once.
Which begs the obvious question, why don't I see the other rooms? Why is the wall there in the first place?
And that leads us perfectly to what Seth calls root agreements.
I love this term, root agreements. It sounds like a legal contract we signed before we were born. I, the undersigned, agree to believe in gravity.
In a way, it is exactly that. Seth defines a root agreement as a collective decision to accept certain data and ignore other data to create a coherent world.
So we all got together, our souls or whatever, and said, okay, look, if we all say everything at once, it is going to be absolute chaos. So let's agree on some ground rules. Gravity goes down, walls are solid, time moves forward, everyone agree. Good, break.
Essentially, yes. It forms the basis for the consensus reality we live in. Seth identifies two major root agreements for physical reality that we take completely for granted. First, object independence. Meaning, we agree that physical objects exist independently of us. If we leave the room, the table is still there. It has its own reality separate from our mind.
Seems reasonable. If I close my eyes, the world doesn't disappear.
Right. That provides stability. And what is the second one? Permanence.
Permanence.
We agree that objects stick around. They don't just poof out of existence for no reason. A chair, remains a chair. It doesn't turn into a bouquet of flowers randomly while you're looking at it.
Also seems like a very handy feature for a universe. I would hate to put my coffee down and have it vanish or turn into a frog.
It is very handy for physical survival. If tigers turned into butterflies and back into tigers, we probably wouldn't have survived as a species because we wouldn't know when to run. But here's the conflict. When we dream or when we project our consciousness inward, we try to take these rules with us.
Ah, I see where this is going. We try to pack our physical reality survival kit into the dream world.
Exactly. We get into a dream state, and maybe a chair does disappear, or a door turns into a window. And our waking mind, our ego, judges it by physical rules. It says, that is impossible, therefore it is not real. It was just a dream.
We gaslight our own dreams.
We do.
Oh.
We totally invalidate the experience because it violated the contract of the physical world.
But we aren't in the physical world at that moment.
Right. Seth says, just because dream objects appear and disappear, this does not mean they do not exist. It just means the root agreement of permanence doesn't apply there.
It is like traveling to a country with different traffic laws, say the UK, and screaming that everyone is driving on the wrong side of the road. They aren't driving wrong. You are just applying the rules from back home.
That is the perfect way to look at it. You are a tourist in inner reality, complaining that the locals aren't following your laws.
So if the laws of physics don't apply there, what does apply? Is it just pure anarchy?
No, it is not anarchy at all. It has its own physics. Seth calls them the root assumptions of inner reality. And this is where we really need to focus.
Here is where it gets really interesting. This is like the physics of the soul. Seth lists 8 of them. And I want to take our time here because these are dense. This is the toolkit for anyone who wants to be a psychonaut.
Let's break them down. Number 1, energy and action are the same.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here. In the physical world, action usually means moving something. I push a cup, that is action. I run a mile, that is action. Thinking about running isn't running.
In the physical world, correct. But in inner reality, you don't need physical motion to have action. A thought is an action. An emotion is an action.
So if I feel a surge of anger in a dream, that isn't just a feeling, that is an actual event.
It is an event as real as a car crash. Energy moving is the event. There is no distinction between the potential and the doing.
Which leads right into number 2. All objects have their origin basically in mental action.
This flips the script entirely. We usually think objects are real hard, solid matter, and thoughts are just wispy things we have about objects.
Right. The table is real. My thought about the table is just smoke.
Seth says mental action-directed psychic energy is the source of the object. The thought creates the thing.
So inside, if I think of a chair, there is a chair.
Yes, but it goes deeper. He is implying that even physical objects started as mental action. The physical world is just the end result of a lot of mental energy becoming frozen into matter.
Okay, so we are living in a frozen thought. I can accept that. But number 3 is the one that I really struggle with. Permanence is not a matter of time.
This is definitely the hardest one for the Western mind to grasp.
Because in our world, real means lasts a long time. The pyramids are real because they've been there for thousands of years. A firework is less permanent because it is gone in a second.
Right. We judge validity by duration. But Seth says in inner reality, permanence or validity is a matter of intensity. Imagine a flash of incredibly intense emotion. Maybe a moment of perfect joy or terrifying fear or a realization that changes your life. It lasts 1 second in clock time.
Okay.
But in inner reality, that flash has more energy, more mass, more reality than a rock that sits in a garden for 1,000,000 years doing absolutely nothing.
So a scream is heavier than a stone.
If the scream is intense enough, yes.
That is wild. It is like physics on jazz. It is about the note you hit, not how long you hold it.
Beautifully put. It explains why some dreams stay with you for decades. They were short, but the intensity gave them permanence in your psyche.
Number 4 connects directly to this. Objects are blocks of energy perceived in a specialized manner.
So everything is just energy. We just happen to have eyes that translate that energy into table, chair, person.
It is the matrix code. We see the blonde in the red dress. The computer just sees ones and zeros.
Exactly. Number 5, stability in time sequence is not a requirement.
This is the one that breaks linear narrative for me.
Right. An object or an event does not need a before and an after to exist. In our world, a tree needs a seed for a before and a log for an after. In inner reality, the tree can just be floating in validity without a history attached to it.
It is like a scene in a movie that exists even if you cut the scenes before and after it. The scene is still there on the film roll.
Yes. It doesn't need a causal chain to justify its existence.
Number 6. Space is not a barrier.
That one seems fairly straightforward for anyone who has ever dreamt. You can be in Paris one second and on the moon the next.
But Seth means it mechanically, doesn't he? Distance is an illusion of the physical agreement. It doesn't cost energy to move across space inwardly. You just change your focus.
Right. Space isn't empty distance to be traversed. It is just a change in frequency.
Number 7. The spacious present is available.
We touched on this. Past, present, and future are all on the menu. You can access any of them. They aren't locked doors.
And finally, number 8. The only barriers are mental barriers.
Which is the most empowering and frightening rule on the list. The only walls are the ones you build yourself. If you are trapped in a nightmare, you are the architect of the cage.
Because thoughts are objects. So if I think I'm trapped, I create a cage.
Exactly. You are trapping yourself with your own creative energy.
So if we synthesize, all of this inner reality is this fluid, intense, high-energy environment where thoughts become things instantly, time is meaningless, and the only thing that keeps it stable is how strongly you feel about it.
Correct. And imagine trying to walk through that environment while holding onto a map from physical reality where things stay put, gravity works, and time ticks forward.
You would think you were going insane.
You absolutely would. And this brings us to one of the most vivid examples Seth gives in this session, the concept of straddling time.
This is the glitch in the matrix moment. Seth describes a specific scenario that I think everyone can visualize.
He asks us to imagine a projection, basically an out-of-body experience or a very vivid dream. You find yourself standing in a room and looking at the decor, the furniture, the candlelight, the powdered wigs. Maybe it is obviously the 1700s.
Okay, so I am in a period piece.
But then you walk to the window and look out. And down on the street, you see a modern automobile drive by.
Okay, logical brain activates immediately. Alert. Alert. Anachronism detected.
Exactly. The logical mind, the ego, says cars didn't exist in the 1700s. This is a subconscious distortion. My brain is just mixing up images. This isn't real.
We dismiss it as a glitch. We say, oh, my brain is just messy tonight.
But Seth says no. You're straddling time. You are perceiving the room as it existed in the 1700s, and you are perceiving the street as it exists now. You are seeing both realities simultaneously.
Because in the spacious present, they are simultaneous.
Yes. But then it gets even trippier. He says the car might disappear and turn into an animal. Or the street might turn into a field.
Okay, now wait a minute. If I'm looking out a window and a Buick turns into a cow and then the asphalt turns into a cornfield, that sounds like psychosis, how is that not just random chaos?
It feels like chaos to the physical mind. But Seth says you're simply picking up and translating the energy pattern before you. You're seeing the layers of history of that specific spot.
Layers.
Think of it like Photoshop layers. But for reality, usually we only see the top layer, the present. But in this state, all the layers are visible. The car is layer 2026. The horse that walked there 200 years ago is layer 1826. The field that was there 500 years ago is layer 1526. They are all energy patterns existing in that exact same space.
So I am seeing the entire history of the location all at once.
Yes, and because you aren't focused securely in one time, they bleed into each other. The car morphs into the horse because you are shifting your focus between layers. It is not a hallucination, it is too much reality.
I really love that phrase, too much reality. It is not that it is fake, it is that it is hyper-real.
Exactly.
But this creates a huge practical problem. If logic fails us in this place, if I can't trust my eyes because the street keeps turning into a cornfield, how do I navigate? If I can't use Google Maps, what do I use?
You have to upgrade your GPS. Seth is very clear on this. He warns that trying to use physical logic renders the experience totally meaningless. You have to use intuition.
Intuition. We usually think of intuition as a hunch, like, I have a bad feeling about this gas station sushi.
It is a bit more refined than that here. In inner reality, events aren't linked by hours and minutes. They are linked by emotional or psychological relevance.
So instead of turn left at the stop sign, it is turn left at the feeling of childhood nostalgia.
Basically, you follow the feeling. Seth says you will find what you expect to find.
Expectation creates reality. That is a classic Sethism.
It is. You seek out what you want from the available data. If you go in expecting monsters, you will manifest monsters because your fear acts as a searchlight. If you go in expecting insight, you will find insight.
This leads to a really bizarre section about identifying forms. Let's say I am in this dream state, navigating by intuition, and I meet a guy. Who is he? Is he a ghost? Is he my neighbor? Is he just a figment of my imagination?
Seth gives a checklist of possibilities, and none of them are simple. It is a masterclass in discernment. First, it could be a thought form sent unconsciously by someone else.
Meaning,
Meaning, your friend Bob is thinking about you really hard, and his energy manifests as a version of Bob in your dream environment. It is not actually Bob, but it is Bob's energy.
kind of a hologram message.
Second, it could be another projectionist, another dreamer out for a stroll.
So we could actually meet up in the dream space, like multiplayer mode.
Yes, Seth implies this happens way more than we realize, but we usually forget it or misinterpret it upon waking. Third, it could be a potential form. He calls it a record played over and over, like an echo of someone who used to be there. A haunting, essentially.
A recording.
And fourth, and this is the wildest one, it would be another version of yourself.
Talk about a mirror moment.
And Seth gives this specific example that helps explain the mechanics of the soul. He says, you see a man, suddenly the man disappears and is replaced by a small girl.
Physical logic says nonsense. People don't turn into little girls. That is impossible.
Inner logic says, wait, that girl is the man's cast, reincarnated self. Or perhaps a future self.
So the man and the girl are the exact same entity.
Yes. The unity of the person is different in the spacious present. You aren't seeing a static person, you are seeing their entire timeline.
It is like looking at an album of photos, but they are all stacked on top of each other.
Exactly. So the form morphs to match the aspect of the personality that is most relevant in that split second.
That is completely mind-bending. It implies that identity isn't fixed at all. I'm not just this host. I am the child I was, the old man I will be, and who knows what else, all rolled into one energy ball.
In an inner reality, that ball can unravel so you see all the parts.
Which brings us to the big philosophical question of the deep dive. If all this stuff is out there, past, present, future, inner realities, energy blocks, why don't we see it all the time? Why is my living room just a living room? Why am I so blind?
This is segment 6, the senses as blinders. And I think this is one of the most provocative ideas in the whole Seth material.
It reverses our entire understanding of biology. We think our eyes and ears are there to show us the world.
Seth says no. The physical senses are designed to block out reality.
They are suppression devices.
They're filters. He says if we perceived everything, all the pasts, all the futures, all the inner dimensions at once, we couldn't function. We would be catatonic, just completely overloaded.
It would be like trying to have a conversation in a room where every radio station on Earth is playing at full volume.
Exactly. You wouldn't be able to hear a single word. So the senses act like a radio tuner. They block out 99.9% of the signal, so you can hear the one station called Physical Reality 2026.
Seth says, it is your nervous and physical mechanism which acts as a limiting device and also as a focusing device.
Think of a horse with blinders, on a carriage in the city.
Right.
The blinders aren't there to make the horse blind. They're there to keep it looking forward so it doesn't get spooked by everything on the periphery. Our senses are our blinders. They force us to focus on now and here so we can actually manipulate physical matter.
So we accepted blindness in exchange for focus.
Yes. And it works perfectly. Look at what we have built. We can build bridges and perform complex surgery because we aren't distracted by the ghosts of the 1700s walking through the operating room.
But sometimes the blinders slip.
They definitely do. Jane had an experience right at the end of this session.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we mention that. There is a note where Jane says that while Seth was talking about the spacious present, she got a weird feeling about the living room. She felt involved in a concept of the thought.
She was starting to peek around the blinders. She wasn't just hearing the concept intellectually, she was starting to feel the spacious present.
She was sensing the energy pattern of the room beyond just the physical walls. It is chilling to think about. It implies that right now, in this room, there are dinosaurs, Victorian families, and maybe cyborgs, and I just can't see them because my eyes are working too well.
That is exactly what it implies. We are sharing this space with everything that has ever happened here.
Okay, my brain is officially soup. Now, we have to ground this, because all this cosmic talk is great, but we still have to pay rent, we still have to buy groceries.
And that is the absolute beauty of the source material. We have the cosmic session, but included right after it in the book is a letter.
A letter written by Robert Butts, Jane's husband, just a few days later on September 12, 1966.
And I love that this is preserved in the text. We go from time is an illusion and objects are mental acts to Dear Dr. Lodico, thanks for the check.
It is such a stark contrast. Rob is writing to a doctor who bought one of his abstract paintings. Let me read a bit of this vibe. He writes, Dear Dr. Lodico, thank you very much for the check for the painting. I'm glad you're pleased with it.
Simple, polite, earthly.
Then he gets into the logistics. I've ordered the frame. I'll let you know when it's ready. He mentions organizing an exhibition at Mount Savior. He says, if you are too busy, drop me a card.
He is hustling. He's trying to sell art. He's organizing framing. He's dealing with the post office.
It is so mundane, and I don't mean that as an insult at all. It is wonderfully mundane. Here's a guy who, 3 nights ago, was talking to a multidimensional entity about the structure of the universe, and now he's worrying about whether a frame will arrive on time.
And I think that is the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
We are these multidimensional beings who can straddle time and create objects with our minds, but we also have to go to the post office.
It is the ultimate example of straddling. Rob is exploring the universe at night with Seth and selling frames by day. It completely humanizes the experience. We all have to, as the saying goes, chop wood, carry water.
Even if you know the wood and the water are just energy blocks perceived in a specialized manner.
You still have to carry them.
And maybe that is the lesson. We agreed to the root assumptions. We signed the contract. We are here to experience the limitations. The limitations aren't a punishment. They are the game mechanics.
The focus creates the intensity. If we saw everything, nothing would matter. Because we only see this, this matters.
Exactly. It gives weight to our choices in the physical world.
So what does this all mean for us? Let's wrap this up. We have covered the ego, the root agreements, the 8 assumptions of inner reality, the concept of straddling time, and the senses as blinders.
The main takeaway for me is that reality is a construct of agreements. We have agreed to see the world this way, but we aren't stuck with just one channel.
If we learn the new rules, intuition, intensity, the spacious present, we can change the channel. We can peek behind the curtain.
But we have to be willing to let go of the physical logic that keeps us safe. We have to be willing to see the car turn into a field and not freak out. We have to trust the inner self.
Here's a final thought for you to chew on while you try to fall asleep tonight.
Oh boy, let's hear it.
If Seth is right, and your senses are blocking out 90% of reality just to keep you focused on now what is standing right next to you, right now, that you simply haven't agreed to see yet.
Yeah, I was going to sleep really well tonight, and now I am not. I am definitely not going to look behind me.
I wouldn't. Just let that sit. This has been a deep dive into session 284.
Huge thanks again to the New Awareness Network. Seriously, go to sethcenter.com, the early sessions, buy the books, support the publisher. Keep this knowledge alive. It is absolutely endless.
And remember, this podcast is distributed free of charge for educational purposes. We are just 2 people reading a book and having our minds blown.
Indeed we are.
Sweet dreams, everyone.
See you in the spacious present.